Chapter 1. Broken Past. The oven timer rang suddenly, and the sharp sound was like a heavy hammer, waking me up from my trance. I looked at the oven in panic. In the glass baking tray, the carefully made red apple cake looked like an abandoned work of art. The icing had cracked at some point, and the cracks spread wantonly like a broken spider web, just like my marriage, which was riddled with holes at the moment without a trace of integrity. "Mom, when will Dad come home?" A childish voice came from behind me. I turned around and saw my daughter Lisa holding the worn-out teddy bear, standing quietly at the kitchen door. Her big eyes reflected the flashing lights of the Christmas tree. She should have been full of innocence and expectation, but I caught a trace of uneasiness and fear in them. My heart suddenly tightened and hurt badly. I subconsciously raised my hand and gently touched her hair. My fingers touched a scabby wound. I paused, and Xavier's hideous appearance emerged uncontrollably in my mind. It was him who grabbed Lisa's hair fiercely because she accidentally knocked over a glass of milk. Once the gate of memory was opened, the past scenes came like a tidal wave. Once, in the university library, the sun shone through the mottled windows, casting pieces of light and shadow. I stood on tiptoe and tried to reach the long-awaited Wuthering Heights on the bookshelf. My fingertips missed again and again. Just when I was full of frustration, a slender hand reached out and took the book easily. I raised my eyes and bumped into Xavier's gentle and smiling eyes. His fingertips gently brushed the back of my hand. The instantaneous temperature seemed to dispel all the coldness in the world. Now thinking back, it is very ironic. On the wedding day, melodious music echoed in the church, and the white wedding dress dragged on the red carpet like a pure cloud. Xavier stood in front of me, his voice trembling slightly, and he swore affectionately, "I will protect you forever." At that moment I was full of joy, thinking that I had found a lifelong support, but who could have expected that this oath was just an illusory dream, and after waking up, there was only endless pain. My thoughts drifted to that rainy night. The dim lights swayed in the wind, and Xavier broke into the door with a drunken smell, and his eyes showed a ferocity that I had never seen before. For some reason he suddenly became furious, grabbed my neck and pushed me against the wall. I struggled desperately, but I couldn't get rid of his shackles. The red wine in his hands spilled out, and the fishy sweet smell filled the air, mixed with his hoarse roar. "Do you think you deserve these?" The wedding dress was soaked in red wine and stuck to my body heavily. The biting cold seemed to penetrate into my bones. I slowly lowered my head. My eyes fell on the carefully carved apple shape on the cake, and my eyes gradually became cold. I picked up the silver fork beside me and slowly carved a small cross on the icing. My movements were mechanical and firm. The yew in the backyard swayed gently in the cold moonlight, as if silently telling something. Last year I planted 3 oleanders there. At that time I might have already buried a seed of revenge in my heart, and now their juice is quietly hidden in the interlayer of the cake, waiting to play a fatal role. "Dad will be back soon." I forced a smile and said to Lisa, but the smile looked particularly pale in the dim light. There is still green juice left by crushing oleander leaves in the cracks of my fingernails, like an indelible mark of sin. Over the years, I have been struggling in this painful marriage, trying to escape countless times, but retreating due to various concerns. I am afraid of losing the custody of Lisa, afraid of facing an unknown life alone, and even more afraid of Xavier's revenge. But my repeated forbearance did not bring him repentance, but more unscrupulous harm. Every time he took action, every vicious insult was like a sharp knife, cutting a wound in my and Lisa's heart that was difficult to heal. Lisa became more and more timid and cowardly. The lively and cheerful little girl was now trembling all day long, not daring to speak loudly or play casually. And I, in this day-to-day torture, gradually lost myself, became numb and desperate. But tonight everything will be different. This seemingly ordinary red apple cake is my carefully planned revenge tool, carrying my resistance to the painful life in the past and my desire for freedom in the future. I took a deep breath, calmed my surging emotions, waited for Xavier to come home, and waited for this revenge drama to officially begin. Chapter 2: The Birth of the Poisonous Plan. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the whole city fell into a deep sleep, and the darkness was like a huge curtain, quietly covering all the sins and secrets. The light in the basement where I was pale and dazzling, exposing my every move at the moment without reservation. I stared at the measuring cup in my hand with full concentration, and carefully dripped the last drop of juice into it. The juice was crystal clear, but it hid deadly danger. Suddenly the phone vibrated in silence. The abrupt sound scared me so much that the dropper in my hand almost slipped. I put down the measuring cup in a panic and picked up the phone. Xavier's name flashed on the screen. My heart sank to the bottom of the valley in an instant. Then a photo came into view. The female neighbor Caitlin was wearing a suspender pajamas, lying lazily on the sofa in Xavier's office, with a hint of pride and provocation in her eyes. "See you at the usual place. I have a surprise for you." The text message was followed by a hotel location. I looked at the message with a sneer on my face, full of self-mockery and anger. Surprise. I'm afraid it's another humiliation. I looked in the mirror and mechanically put on my lipstick. My face in the mirror was haggard, but my eyes showed unprecedented determination. I reached out, tore off the bloody white coat and stuffed it into the garbage bag. Last week, Xavier pushed me down the stairs. My knees and palms were scratched and the blood stained the white coat red. The pain seemed to remain in various parts of my body, reminding me of the suffering I had suffered. After dealing with the white coat, I walked out of the basement lightly. When I passed Lisa's room, a faint light came through the crack of the door. My heart tightened and I slowly pushed the door open. I saw Lisa's small body curled up in the quilt, shivering all over, and a few torn crayon drawings were scattered beside the pillow. I approached, picked up the fragments and pieced them together. It was a family portrait, but the picture was already unrecognizable. Xavier's face was burned by cigarette butts with countless black holes, like a cursed evil ghost. "Mom, does Dad dislike me?" Lisa sobbed. Her voice was nasal, her eyes were red and swollen, full of grievance and fear. I sat down on the bed with heartache and gently wiped the tears from her face. Inadvertently, the green juice left in the nails rubbed on her face like a strange mark. "No, baby." I kissed her forehead gently, but my voice was cold without a trace of temperature. "Dad will leave us forever soon." When I said this, I didn't feel a trace of guilt in my heart, only full of relief and pleasure of revenge. Over the years, Xavier's torture of my mother and me has completely exhausted my last bit of affection for him. Back in my room, I began to change clothes and every movement was steady and calm. I picked out a dress that he had once loved the most. It was a gift from him when we were in love. Now when I put it on, it felt like a layer of cold armor. I repeatedly sorted out the next plan in my mind and every detail could not be missed. I remembered the scene when I first discovered Xavier's cheating. It was an ordinary afternoon. I came home early from get-off work and wanted to give him a surprise, but I found women's underwear in the bedroom. At that moment, my world was spinning and anger, pain, and despair were intertwined. I questioned him, but what I got in return was his beating and scolding and more unscrupulous betrayal. Since then, I began to pay attention to his every move and collect evidence of his cheating. At the same time, the fire of revenge in my heart burned more and more. In order to implement this revenge plan, I paid too much. I secretly borrowed A Brief History of Toxicology from the community library, and hid in the basement to study it every day when Xavier was not at home. I extracted toxins from plants in the backyard, conducted experiments again and again, and recorded the effects of different doses. Every experiment was like groping in the dark, full of unknowns and dangers, but I never thought of giving up. During the process, I was almost discovered by Xavier several times. Once he suddenly went home early and I hid the tools for the experiment in a panic and pretended to sort out the sundries in the basement. He looked at me suspiciously and asked me what I was doing. I pretended to be calm and lied that I was making handmade candles. My palms were sweaty with nervousness. Fortunately, he did not delve into it and turned away. I was relieved, but my determination to revenge was even stronger. Tonight, everything will come to an end. I looked at myself in the mirror with a firm and resolute look. I know that if I take this step there will be no turning back, but I don't care. As long as I can get rid of Xavier's control and make him pay for what he did, I will not hesitate even if I die. I picked up my bag, took a last look at the sleeping Lisa, gently closed the door, and walked towards the hotel that determined my fate. Chapter 3. Game of Christmas Eve. On Christmas Eve, the city seemed to be covered with a layer of dreamy coat. The streets and alleys were decorated with lights. The Christmas trees flashed colorful lights. The air was filled with the aroma of roasted turkey and cinnamon, and laughter and joy were heard one after another. But these bustles and warmth, to me, are nothing but illusory bubbles that will break at the touch. Snowflakes fluttered down and gently sprinkled on the entrance. I heard familiar footsteps coming from the door. My heart suddenly tightened, and my hands unconsciously clenched my apron. Xavier pushed open the door of his house, and his leather shoes heavily rolled over the floor that I had just polished to a shine, leaving a string of dirty footprints, like the dirt he brought to my life, which could not be wiped off. He pulled at his tie, his face full of impatience, his eyes casually swept across the table full of delicacies, and finally landed on the red apple cake I made carefully with a mocking smile on his lips. "You are doing these useless things again, can't you do something serious?" His voice was cold and harsh, like a sharp knife, easily cutting through this seemingly beautiful night. "Try it, I made it specially for you." I tried to make my voice sound gentle and expectant, picked up the cake and slowly pushed it in front of him. Because of nervousness, my nails scratched a subtle but sharp sound on the edge of the porcelain plate, which was particularly abrupt in the quiet room. I saw that his brows frowned deeper and a trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. This expression was very familiar to me. Every time he was dissatisfied with me and Lisa he looked like this. "If you want to eat, eat it yourself, don't bother me here." He waved his hand in annoyance and turned to leave. I gritted my teeth and deliberately knocked over the milk cup on the table. With a clang, the glass cup broke into pieces on the ground and the milk splashed everywhere. Xavier was startled by the sudden movement. He turned around abruptly and the anger on his face was instantly ignited. "What are you doing? If you can't even do such a small thing, what else can you do?" His roar shook the crystal chandelier slightly, and the lights flickered as if to help my plan. "Yes, I'm sorry." I lowered my head, pretending to be scared and guilty, my body trembling slightly, and I saw the curtains of the apartment opposite moved from the corner of my eye. Caitlin was hiding behind and peeping. I sneered in my heart. Everything was going according to plan. While bending down to pick up the glass fragments, I quietly rolled the medicine bottle hidden in my apron pocket under the sofa. The medicine bottle contained the poison I carefully refined with the oleander in the backyard, and every drop was full of my hatred for Xavier. "Look at you, you have made a mess of the house." Xavier was still accusing him relentlessly, spitting. I knelt on the ground, picking up the fragments while counting silently in my mind. 1, 2, 3. When I counted to the 10th time, I knew it was time to use the final trump card. "You are right." I suddenly raised my head, my voice choked and my eyes were filled with tears. "I can't do anything well. I'm tired of this kind of life. Let's get a divorce." When I said the word, divorce, I saw a flash of astonishment on Xavier's face, followed by anger and disdain. "Divorce? Do you think you can live without me? You useless woman, you are nothing without me." He rushed over, grabbed my hair and lifted my head up. I gasped in pain, but I felt a sense of revenge in my heart. "Let me go." I struggled hard and took the opportunity to pass the fork to him. "Since you look down on me so much, just eat this cake and treat it as our last dinner." I stared straight into his eyes with provocation and determination in my eyes. Xavier was enraged by my sudden resistance. He glared at me fiercely as if he wanted to eat me alive. After a few seconds of stalemate, he suddenly snatched the fork from my hand, grabbed the cake and took a big bite. While chewing, he cursed incoherently, "Eat it, I want to see what tricks you can come up with." I watched him swallow the cake, my heartbeat accelerated rapidly, but on the surface I pretended to be scared and regretful. "You don't eat so fast." In fact, I was counting down silently in my heart. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Almost at the moment I counted the last number, Xavier's face began to change. His pupils contracted sharply, his hands unconsciously covered his throat, and his face showed a painful expression. What did you do to me?" He squeezed out a few words with difficulty, his voice hoarse and full of fear. I took a few steps back with a barely perceptible sneer on my face. "Don't you always say I'm useless? This is my ability. You will have to pay for what you did to me and Lisa today." Xavier's body began to shake and he tried to stand firm but fell heavily to the ground. He rolled on the ground in pain, scratching his throat with both hands desperately and groaning in pain. I stood aside looking at him coldly, and the scenes of him beating, scolding and humiliating me kept flashing in my mind. Once he threw Lisa's toys on the road and let the car crush them. He dumped the meals I worked hard to prepare into the trash can and called me a waste. He humiliated me in front of my friends and made me lose my dignity. Every scene was like a knife, piercing my heart and strengthening my determination to revenge. "Help! Help!" Xavier's voice became weaker and weaker, and his eyes were full of fear and despair. I ignored his call for help but turned to the window, opened the curtains and let the snow outside drift in and fall on Xavier's painful and twisted face. This is the punishment he deserves. I want him to pay the price of his life for his evil deeds on this cold Christmas Eve. Chapter 4. Death Scene and Crisis. Xavier rolled on the ground in pain, and every groan was like a dying struggle after being strangled. His body twisted into a strange shape, and his hands were desperately digging his throat, as if he could dig the deadly poison out of his body. His face quickly turned from the initial redness to purple, and beads of sweat rolled down his forehead, mixed with the milk on the floor and flickered strangely in the dim light. Save me." His voice was as weak as a gossamer, his eyes were full of fear and despair, and he looked straight at me as if he was still expecting me to be soft-hearted and save him. But I just stood aside quietly, looking at him with an indifferent look as if looking at a stranger. The past that he had treated me cruelly kept surging in my mind like a surging tide. Every scene was accompanied by a piercing pain, which made the flame of revenge in my heart burn more and more vigorously, leaving no mercy for the dying man in front of me. The sound of sirens came from far away, breaking the dead and chaotic night. I knew that I didn't have much time left. I took a deep breath, forced myself to calm down, and quickly stuffed the syringe containing poison into Xavier's suit pocket, where Caitlin's suspender pajamas button was placed. This was a little surprise I prepared in advance, hoping to add a touch of interesting color to the next investigation. I walked quickly to the basement again, stuffed all the experimental instruments with traces of poison into a shabby cardboard box, hid it in the most hidden corner of the basement and covered it with sundries. After doing all this, I returned to the living room and looked at Xavier, who was still twitching on the ground, without a ripple in my heart. When the police broke into the room, Xavier had stopped struggling and lay quietly on the ground as if he was asleep. Only his ferocious expression and purple face told of his agony before death. "Madam, please calm down." A young police officer tried to pull me away. The faint smell of shaving water on his body penetrated my nose, which was exactly the same as Xavier's. This familiar smell made me lose control instantly. I screamed and rushed to Xavier's body. My nails scratched 5 bloody marks on his neck, which was exactly the number of scars Xavier left after Lisa wet the bed last time. This was my final revenge on him. My husband. How could he be like this? I collapsed on the ground and cried loudly, tears and snot all over my face. The grief-stricken look made anyone who saw it couldn't help but be moved. "Madam, we need to investigate the specific situation. Please cooperate." Another older police officer stepped forward, with a concerned look and professional seriousness. I sobbed and nodded, but I was quickly thinking about the next words in my heart. The medical examiner arrived soon and conducted a preliminary examination of Xavier's body. When the medical examiner detected oleandrin in the cake, I covered my mouth in time and let out a low cry of fear. How could it be? I made this cake myself. How could I harm him? I choked and my voice trembled. Did someone secretly poison it? As I spoke, I secretly observed the reactions of the police. Madam, don't worry, we will investigate it clearly. The older police officer comforted me, but his eyes were full of suspicion and scrutiny. In the next few days, the police began to conduct an in-depth investigation of the case. They visited neighbors and asked relatives and friends, not missing any details. I pretended to be heartbroken and carefully responded to every question from the police. Private Detective Miller appeared on the scene. He was hired by Xavier's family to conduct an independent investigation of the case. When he first came to my house, I noticed the pollen on his sleeves. It was the variety I planted in the backyard. I was shocked, but I calmed down quickly and my face was still sad. Madam, according to the neighbors, you often go to the library recently. Miller sat on the sofa in the living room, staring at me sharply, and the pen in his hand tapped lightly on the notebook, making a rhythmic sound as if putting pressure on me. I'm looking up children's psychology books. I twisted my fingers and dodged my eyes. Lisa has been having nightmares recently. I want to know more about how to help her. As I said this, I silently prayed in my heart that he would not find any flaws. Is that so? Miller nodded, but his eyes were still suspicious. Have you found anything special about Mr. Xavier's recent whereabouts and the people he has been associating with? I don't know. I bit my lip. He has been leaving early and returning late recently and rarely communicates with me. I thought he was busy with work. I paused deliberately as if I suddenly remembered something. By the way, he seems to be very close to a woman in the apartment opposite. I once saw them talking downstairs and their behavior was very intimate. I know that involving Caitlin can make the direction of the investigation more confusing and buy me more time. Miller listened to what I said and a hint of interest flashed in his eyes. He quickly recorded in his notebook. I watched his actions and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, I also understood that in the days to come, every step must be taken more carefully. If I am not careful, all my carefully planned things will fall short. Chapter 5. Undercurrent Investigation. After Miller left, I sat in the living room for a long time, my heart still beating violently in my chest. Every time I looked at him, it was like walking on the edge of a cliff, and I would be crushed to pieces if I was not careful. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there and wait for death. I got up, walked to the window, opened a corner of the curtain, and looked at Caitlin's apartment across the street. The lights were on and her figure was looming behind the curtains. I sneered, this woman will soon become a chess piece in my hands. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. Hello. Caitlin's voice was alert. It's me. We have to talk about Xavier. I tried to make my voice sound calm, but I couldn't help trembling slightly. Why should I talk to you? Her tone was full of hostility. Because you don't want to be involved in this murder, right? I said bluntly, besides, I have something you want. There was silence on the other end of the phone for a moment. Okay, see you downstairs in half an hour. After hanging up the phone, I took a deep breath and began to prepare the things I needed for the meeting. I took out a stack of photos from the safe, which was the ironclad evidence of Xavier and Caitlin's tryst, and a forged letter, the content of which implied that Xavier had participated in commercial fraud and had grudges with some dangerous people. I put these things in an envelope and stuffed them into my bag. Half an hour later I came downstairs. Caitlin was already there, wrapped in a thick coat, looking nervous. What on earth do you want to do? She asked immediately when she saw me. Take a look at this first. I handed her the envelope. She opened the envelope, saw the photos and the letter, and her face turned pale instantly. What's going on? Her voice trembled. It's very simple, I said calmly. Now the police suspect me. I need your help. You just need to do what I say. These things will never be seen by others and you will not be implicated. What do you want me to do? She asked hesitantly. When the police ask, you say that Xavier has been acting strangely recently, as if he is hiding from someone, and has quarreled with some strange men. I explained in detail. In addition, you have to pretend to be very scared and let them believe that you have nothing to do with this matter. Caitlin bit her lip, thought for a while and finally nodded. Okay, I promise you. But you'd better not play tricks. Don't worry, as long as you cooperate, I won't give you out. I said, turned around and left. Back home I started to work on the next plan. The police's test report on the cake became more and more detailed, and I knew they were getting closer and closer to the truth. I must act quickly to divert their attention. I thought of Jack, Xavier's partner when his business failed, who had always hated Xavier. I contacted Jack with an anonymous phone and told him that the police were investigating the cause of Xavier's death. If he didn't want to be implicated, it would be better for him to take the initiative to provide some clues. Jack was very cautious at first, but when I mentioned that Xavier had secretly framed him and caused his business to go bankrupt, his anger was ignited. Who are you? Why are you helping me? He asked. It doesn't matter. What matters is whether you want Xavier to pay for what he did. I said coldly, as long as you do what I say and lead the suspicion to someone else, you can get rid of the suspicion and get rid of your anger. Jack was silent for a moment. Okay, I promise you. But you'd better not lie to me. After hanging up the phone, I started to deal with the problem of Private Detective Miller. I bribed the clerk of the convenience store that Miller often went to, and asked him to deliberately put a small amount of sleeping pills in Miller's coffee when Miller came to buy something next time. At the same time, I installed a bug in Miller's car so that I could keep track of his investigation progress at any time. A few days later, Miller really felt dizzy while driving and lost control of the car on the highway. Fortunately, he was only slightly injured. After I got the news, I was secretly happy, but pretended to be worried on the surface and called Xavier's family to inquire about the situation. It's terrible. Will Mr. Miller be okay? I said hypocritically on the phone. The doctor said it was just a skin injury, but he seemed to have been drugged. Xavier's mother was worried on the other end of the phone. How could this happen? Is it related to Xavier's case? I asked in surprise. We don't know either. The police are investigating. Xavier's mother sighed. After hanging up the phone, I knew that this game had entered a white-hot stage. Because of Miller's accident and the clues provided by Jack, the police began to deviate from the direction of the investigation. But I know that I can't take it lightly. Any small detail may make me lose all my previous efforts. I must continue to carefully plan until I completely get rid of suspicion and put a perfect end to this revenge. Chapter 6. Key Reversal. The news that Miller was injured in a car accident spread quickly, causing quite a stir among Xavier's family and the police. I knew that this was a critical moment for me to turn the situation around, and I had to strike while the iron was hot. I asked Caitlin to meet me at an inconspicuous cafe in the city. When she came in, she looked flustered, her eyes kept darting around like a frightened rabbit. After sitting down, she twisted her hands together nervously and asked, "What's going on?" Miller got into trouble and the police have been watching me these 2 days. I can't stand it anymore. I took out an envelope from my bag slowly and pushed it in front of her. There is 500,000 in it, you take it first. As long as you help me one more time, the remaining 500,000 will be deposited immediately, and you can take the money and run away to live your own life. When Caitlin heard about the money, her eyes lit up for a moment but soon dimmed again. She bit her lip and said, "What do you want me to do? The police are almost turning my house upside down." I leaned forward and lowered my voice. "It's very simple. You just tell the police that Xavier had a fierce quarrel with a man named David. David is his business rival and has been threatening him recently. You overheard them quarreling fiercely on the phone and mentioned that he should pay the price." I observed her expression while speaking. Seeing that she was a little hesitant, I added, "As long as you do what I say, the police will shift their attention to David, and you can completely get rid of suspicion, take the money to Europe and start a new life." Caitlin was silent for a long time and finally nodded. "Okay, I'll believe you again. But if you lie to me, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. I smiled slightly but sneered in my heart. When all this is over, she will be just a passerby on my road to revenge. After leaving the cafe, I rushed home without stopping, turned on the computer and logged into the anonymous email address. I spent 3 days forging a series of emails in which David threatened Xavier, imitating the tone and words perfectly. The emails described in detail David's hatred for Xavier and his plan to retaliate, and attached some screenshots of chat records that looked real. These screenshots were synthesized by me using a professional software, which was enough to be mistaken for the real thing. I sent these emails anonymously to the police officer in charge of the case, and also hinted in the emails that David might be related to several recent commercial crimes, which successfully attracted the attention of the police. Sure enough, not long after, the police began to investigate David. When David was summoned by the police, he was completely stunned. He was a timid person, and he was so nervous that he was incoherent when facing the police's questioning. I learned from the informants I bought in the police station that David could not provide an alibi at all, and his whereabouts were blank at the critical time point. Coupled with the evidence I forged, the police almost determined that he was the biggest suspect in the murder of Xavier. But I knew that this alone was not enough. I contacted an employee who used to work at Xavier's company. He had been holding a grudge against Xavier because he was fired without reason. I gave him a sum of money and asked him to tell the police that Xavier had embezzled public funds in the company and colluded with some criminals. David might have killed him to seek justice for himself and other victims. As soon as the news came out, public opinion was in an uproar. The media reported it one after another, and the public's attention was completely diverted from me, and they all focused on the unknown business shady dealings of David and Xavier. Xavier's family also began to panic. They didn't expect things to develop in this direction, and their original suspicion of me gradually faded. During this period, I pretended to be an innocent victim, cooperated with the police's inquiries, and secretly observed the development of the situation. Whenever I saw those reports in the media that were unfavorable to David, I felt an indescribable pleasure in my heart. This is Xavier's retribution. Even if he died, he would be ruined. But just when I thought everything was under control, an accident happened. After Miller recovered from his injury, he resumed his investigation. He noticed that something was wrong with the case. Although all the evidence pointed to David, he always felt that something was overlooked. Miller began to resort out the details of the case, not letting go of any small clues. When I learned the news, my heart tightened, realizing that this difficult guy might become a stumbling block to my plan. I decided to take the initiative and sent Miller another anonymous letter. The letter hinted to him that there might be a bigger force behind David manipulating all this, and asked him to turn the direction of the investigation to those large companies that had business dealings with Xavier. At the same time, I also attached some blurry photos in the letter showing several mysterious people meeting David. These photos were also processed, but they were enough to arouse Miller's curiosity. Miller really took the bait, and he began to shift his attention from David to investigate those large companies. At this time, David, under the dual pressure of the police and public opinion, was on the verge of collapse. He kept defending himself, but no one believed him. Looking at his miserable appearance, I knew that my revenge plan was nearing completion. I only needed one last step to completely get rid of this nightmare. Chapter 7: Public Opinion and Psychological Warfare. On the TV screen, Xavier's mother was crying and complaining to the camera. "My son is a kind person, how could he be a domestic abuser? This must be someone behind the scenes, it's a false accusation." Her voice was sharp and crying, echoing in the room. I sat on the sofa watching all this coldly and gently pressed the remote control with my fingers to switch to another channel. The picture turned, and a well-known anonymous blogger was sitting in front of the camera, with a serious expression, methodically exposing Xavier's bullying incident in college. Old photos and interview videos on the screen revealed Xavier's past evil deeds one by one. The blogger's words were sharp, and every word was like a sharp blade, stabbing Xavier's long-broken personality. The comment area was instantly occupied by angry netizens, and the abuse and accusations were overwhelming. Dear viewers, we just received a surveillance video. The female anchor's voice suddenly trembled and her tone was full of shock. Then a blurry but recognizable picture appeared on the screen. Xavier walked into a convenience store and bought a bottle of poison at the counter. I looked at this carefully synthesized video, and a sneer rose unconsciously at the corner of my mouth. For this video I spent a lot of time and energy, from collecting Xavier's video materials to using software for editing and synthesis, and polished every detail repeatedly to ensure that there were no flaws. As far as we know, this surveillance video was shot shortly before Mr. Xavier was killed. What secrets are hidden behind this? How will the police investigate? Let us continue to pay attention. The female anchor's closing remarks successfully aroused the curiosity of the audience and brought the heat of public opinion to a new climax. At the same time, the network promoters I hired were not idle. They posted carefully written articles on major social platforms, detailing Xavier's various evil deeds over the years, from domestic violence against his wife and child abuse to commercial fraud and harming partners. Each article was accompanied by a large number of screenshots of seemingly real evidence, which triggered crazy forwarding and discussion among netizens. This kind of person deserves to die. He is simply a scumbag and deserves to die. The police must conduct a thorough investigation and not let any bad guy go. Comments from netizens poured in like a tide, and each one seemed to cheer for my revenge. Under the guidance of public opinion, the public sympathy quickly tilted towards me, and the disgust and condemnation of Xavier reached its peak. And I did not forget to continue to shape my image of poor wife in reality. I frequently accepted media interviews, and each time I wore a plain black dress, messy hair, and my eyes were full of sadness and helplessness. Facing the camera, I tearfully recounted how I had lived a dark life under Xavier's torture over the years. He always beat and scolded me and the children, and we lived in fear every day. I wanted to escape countless times, but he threatened me that if I dared to leave, he would kill our whole family. I choked and tears kept rolling down. I thought I would never escape his clutches in this life, but I didn't expect. My voice stopped abruptly as if I was too painful to continue. Once this interview was broadcast, it immediately caused an uproar. Countless people expressed sympathy and support for me, and many people even organized themselves to provide me with help and protection. Xavier's family was in chaos at this time. They didn't expect that public opinion would be overwhelmingly in favor of me. They tried to fight back, hiring water troops to whitewash Xavier online, and publishing some false statements and evidence. But in the face of the overwhelming truth, these actions seemed so pale and powerless, and instead aroused stronger disgust and doubts from netizens. In this public opinion and psychological warfare, I not only have to deal with external pressure, but also comfort my daughter Lisa. These days she was frightened by everything around her, always following me closely with fear and confusion in her eyes. I know that she is too young to understand all this, but I must make her believe that her mother will protect her and we will never be hurt again. Baby, don't be afraid. I stroked Lisa's hair gently and said softly, Dad has done a lot of bad things and now everyone knows it. In the future we will live a good life. Lisa raised her head and looked at me, tears flashing in her eyes. Mom, I'm so scared. Is Dad really a bad guy? I hugged her tightly in my arms and said firmly, Yes, baby. But he can't hurt us anymore. However, I also know clearly that this war is not completely over. Although public opinion has stood on my side, the police investigation is still going on, and new variables may appear at any time. I must remain vigilant and not relax at all. I closely follow the police's every move, obtain the latest investigation progress through various channels, and constantly improve my response strategy to ensure that I can protect myself and Lisa under any circumstances. Chapter 8. New Life and Secrets. The final trial day is coming, and the atmosphere in the court is so solemn that it is almost suffocating, and the air is filled with tension and uneasiness. I am wearing a simple black dress, and my deliberately messed hair just adds a bit of pitiful meaning. The moment I stepped into the courtroom, everyone's eyes were all on me, with sympathy, scrutiny, and curiosity. I lowered my head slightly, pursed my lips, and perfectly portrayed the image of a victim who had experienced many vicissitudes and was still in shock. The jury members were passing around the letters that Xavier had threatened his partners one by one. They were the treasures I had found from the most hidden safe in his study. Every word and every alteration was ironclad evidence of his crimes. I secretly glanced at the jury and saw that they frowned, their faces full of anger and shock, and I couldn't help but secretly breathe a sigh of relief. "Please ask the prosecution witness to appear in court." The judge's voice echoed in the courtroom, majestic and solemn. Caitlin walked up to the witness stand, her hands trembling slightly, her eyes erratic. I looked at her and sneered in my heart. This woman who had been entangled with Xavier was now just a chess piece in my hands. "Witness, please state what you know truthfully," the prosecutor said solemnly. Caitlin took a deep breath and began to testify according to what we had agreed in advance. I heard Xavier and David arguing fiercely on the phone, and David threatened to make him pay. Later, I saw them meet on the street corner and David looked very fierce. Her voice trembled slightly, sounding nervous and scared. I listened quietly on the side, looking sad on the surface but calm on the inside. Everything was going according to my plan. David was probably still in prison crying out for his innocence, but he didn't know that he had already become the scapegoat I had carefully planned. During the trial, Xavier's lawyer tried to question me and wanted to overturn the image of poor wife I had created. "You said you have been suffering from domestic violence for a long time. Why didn't you call the police?" His voice was sharp and full of aggression. I raised my head, tears welled up in my eyes, and answered in a trembling voice, I'm scared. He threatened me every time that if I called the police he would kill me and my daughter and ruin my reputation. What can I do as a weak woman with a young daughter? My answer caused a sigh in the audience, and many people cast sympathetic eyes at me. As the trial progressed, the evidence became increasingly unfavorable to Xavier. The clues and witness testimonies that I carefully arranged, like an invisible net, completely exposed Xavier's crimes. The judge's face became more and more solemn, and the jury members began to whisper and discuss in a low voice. Finally, the judge struck the gavel and announced a recess. During the short break, I hid in the corner of the court, my heartbeat accelerated rapidly. Although everything was under control, the upcoming verdict still made me feel extremely nervous. I thought of the pain I had suffered over the years and Lisa's terrified eyes, and a sense of determination surged in my heart. No matter what, I must make it all end completely. When the court opened again, there was silence in the courtroom. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the judge to pronounce the verdict. After the trial, the evidence is conclusive. Xavier's death is closely related to David. David is suspected of murder. The judge's voice echoed in the courtroom. My tense nerves finally relaxed, and the corners of my mouth slightly raised, revealing a barely perceptible smile. Walking out of the courtroom, the sun shone on my body, warm, but it couldn't dispel the chill deep in my heart. Lisa rushed out of the crowd and threw herself into my arms. "Mom, can we go home?" Her voice was crying and her little body was still trembling slightly. "Yes, baby, let's go home." I hugged her tightly, feeling her warmth and dependence. When I got home, I started to pack my luggage. Looking at this home that was once full of painful memories, I felt mixed emotions. I opened the closet and packed my clothes one by one. Suddenly, an old shirt of Xavier came into view. I picked it up, and the scene of him speaking ill of me and beating me with fists and feet emerged in my mind, and a feeling of disgust surged in my heart. I threw the shirt into the trash can without hesitation, as if I wanted to completely abandon everything in the past. When I was sorting out Lisa's toys, she suddenly took out a diary from an old doll. "Mom, what is this?" she asked curiously. I took the diary, my hands trembling slightly. It was my revenge diary, which recorded every step of my plan and my inner struggle in detail. I looked at Lisa's innocent eyes, hesitated for a moment, and finally decided to tell her the truth. "Baby, this diary records Mom's pain over the years, and also records everything Mom has done to protect us. Dad is a bad man, he hurt us, Mom doesn't want him to continue to hurt us, so," I said slowly, tears blurred my eyes again. Lisa nodded, not quite understanding. Mom, I don't blame you, I just hope we can be fine in the future. Her words warmed my heart and I hugged her tightly. Yes, baby, we will be fine in the future. That night, I sat in the rocking chair in the backyard, looking at the twinkling stars in the night sky, and my heart was calm. My phone suddenly vibrated and an anonymous message came into my eyes. The enemy has confessed and everything is settled. I smiled and threw the phone into the trash can. This anonymous helper may be someone who has been hurt by Xavier, or it may be a mysterious force arranged by fate to help me. But at this moment none of this matters. I stood up, walked into the house, looked at Lisa who was sleeping and gently tucked her in. From now on, a new life for Lisa and me has just begun. The pain and hatred of the past will be buried deep in my heart and become a secret memory. And we will bravely move towards the future with this new hope.